If substitutes are a threat to the firm's profits, perhaps because of the effect that they have on buyers' sensitivity to price, as we've just looked at, what strategic responses might the firm have to that threat? One idea is what's called product differentiation. That is, you're going to try and make your product different from those of your competitors and from other potential substitutes that are being produced by other industries. So the idea would be that the firm could make itself better off if it could somehow change its product in some way that creates a greater distance between that product and potential substitutes. This is sometimes called differentiating the product. So you're trying to make your product at least seem different, or perhaps really be different from those of potential competitors. So to connect it with earlier ideas, the idea would be that if there are fewer close substitutes, then the elasticity of demand is going to be less. Your buyers are going to be less price sensitive, and that's going to be good for the firm's market power and its profits. And again, by market power, I just mean the firm's ability to set its own price and to set that price above marginal costs. Well, that product differentiation process can take a form that I'm going to call a dynamic process. That is, it involves some continual change. For example, the firm could be continually developing new products or new versions of its existing product. And that could keep increasing the distance between its product and potential substitutes. And every time that happens, that could lead to an increase in its market power by making demand less price elastic. Of course, the firm's competitors and firms in other industries could be doing exactly the same thing. So if they do that, then what might sort of evolve is a kind of arms race in which each firm is trying to stay one step ahead of the other firm, or at least not to stay 2 steps behind. If that happens, the result could actually be good for buyers if that product differentiation takes the form of truly new and improved versions of the product. Let's look at a possible example. I thought of this Apple product. It's called an iPod Nano, which I never owned one myself, but I guess it stores and plays music. And over this 12-year period from 2005 to 2017, there were 7 different generations of this product. Some of the time between those generations was sometimes very short. A new model sometimes appeared a little more than a year after the previous one. The product differentiation took the form of changing a variety of different characteristics of these devices. The number of songs that they could store, the size of the screen, their weight, their size, how long the battery lasted, and of course, there's probably some price competition as well. Of course, this was not the only product in the market that did something along these lines, and there were competing products which also evolved, and some of those competitors also fell behind and were unsuccessful. Over a longer period of time, this kind of dynamic product innovation can result in significant change. I thought of the Sony Walkman as an example. A long time ago, I bought one of the first versions of the Sony Walkman, which looked like this thing here on the upper left. It was by modern standards, a kind of crude device. It had a light set of headphones. It played an audio cassette, and it also had a little radio receiver in it. But for its time, it was a big breakthrough. Well, I won't trace through its evolution in any detail, but you can see that the more recent version here is vastly different from the original. So as the Sony Walkman gradually evolved over the decades, so did its competition. So perhaps Sony was leading in this particular area, but other firms were also competing and sort of nipping at its heels, so to speak. This kind of dynamic product differentiation that I've just described doesn't happen for all products. So the other kind of product differentiation that occurs to me is one that I would describe as static, or at least relatively static. The example that came to mind were the classic chocolate bars, some of which I've pictured here. These essentially same brands and same products have been around for decades, sometimes as long as I can remember, with generally little or no innovation. Sometimes perhaps a different kind of chocolate is tried, or maybe a different kind of nut or something is put in them, but the innovation is relatively small. What else might firms do to deal with the threat of substitutes? Another consideration is something that I mentioned earlier just very briefly, the idea of switching costs. So buyers can sometimes face costs of switching away from the firm's product to switching towards other brands or other suppliers. For example, other sellers might be some distance away. So the further away are potential competitors selling some substitute product, the more protection does the firm have from competition. It may be that buyers might have some difficulty or have to invest some time and effort in figuring out what the prices are of other products or services that they might consider buying. Perhaps more interestingly, a kind of switching cost would be the difficulty of determining the quality or the characteristics of substitute goods, particularly what I would call experience goods. In economics, the term an experience good refers to a good that you actually need to experience, where you need to actually buy it and try it out to figure out whether it's good or not, whether you like it or not. For example, think about a restaurant meal. If you've been going to a particular restaurant and you're thinking of trying another one, well, there's a bit of a risk. Maybe the food there isn't going to be as good. So you don't know until you actually go and try it. The opposite of an experience good is what's called an inspection good. So an inspection good just means you can just look at it and you can tell what its characteristics are, and there's no need to actually sample it to see whether it's any good or not. So, for example, if you go to a fast food restaurant that's part of a franchise, then if you've eaten at one of them, you know exactly what you're going to get when you go to another branch of the same corporation. So you don't find that that's going to be an experience good. It would turn it into an inspection good. That might be one of the ideas of making these things so uniform. As well, buyers might have some costs in learning how to use other products. If you're going to use some complicated piece of machinery, for example, workers might need to be trained in how to use it. So what might firms do about switching costs? Well, I suppose one thing that a firm could do is to try to lower the cost of having other people's customers switch towards its product. An example that occurred to me is word processing programs. I've long used a program called WordPerfect. It reads Word files, and it will allow you to save files in Word format as well. So somebody could send you a Word document, you would have no trouble reading it. And anybody who got disgusted with Word and wanted to switch to WordPerfect would have a program that would read all of their old files. Of course, Word does the same thing. It will read WordPerfect files. Well, instead of trying to lower the cost of people switching to your product, you can try to raise the cost for your customers of switching away from your product. So if you can raise those switching costs, that's going to make them more reluctant to go and look for a substitute product. An example that occurs to me is something that you occasionally see, say a package, and on the package is a coupon. So if you buy the product, you can cut out the coupon and get a discount on your next purchase. Well, if you've got that coupon, that's going to, in effect, give you a switching cost in buying some different product. It's going to make it more attractive to buy that same product again. And if you do that, you might encourage the development of brand loyalty, which is also going to make demand more price elastic, inelastic. So it'll make demand less price sensitive. People are going to be more inclined to stick with your brand. That would also, by the way, give the firm the possibility of raising the price that it's offering for the product before the discount without losing existing customers, because they're going to have a coupon that's going to give them a discount on their next purchase. Well, again, everybody can try that same strategy. So if all sellers are pursuing the same policy, trying to increase the switching costs that their own buyers have, then they're sort of, in a way, dividing the market up among themselves. So everybody has their own little pool of customers that face relatively high costs of switching away from the product that they're currently buying. This is called segmenting the market. So you're dividing the market into segments or different parts. So if everyone can make demand for their product more price inelastic, so their customers are going to be less likely to switch away to alternative products, then that's going to have the beneficial effect for the firms, for all of the firms, of making price competition less attractive. Because if one firm cuts its prices, it's not going to attract as many customers from other firms as it otherwise would.